Hey everybody, welcome to another Trippin' with Todd podcast. Glad you're here. Glad I'm finally here. It's been a while since I have done a podcast. You know, I got really busy there for a little while. Every week, on the road, traveling, doing stories. So I didn't do any podcasts, didn't do any YouTube videos. I actually did this podcast, at least recorded it, long ago and never did anything with it because I got so busy. So now I'm finally to where I have edited the interview portion. Now I'm doing the intro portion. And with me, I shoot them on video as well as do them on audio. So it takes a little bit of extra effort, but there's really no excuse. I should have had this long ago. And I think the average number of podcasts that are done for any one podcast is 6. I think this might be 5 or 6 for me. So I hope to beat that trend and have more than just the average, because I don't want to be just average. I want to be better than average. So the topic of this podcast is a friend of mine, Mike Samuelson. He's not average. He's a great guy. And we're talking about planting trees and talking about him and his love of stories and storytelling. And without any further ado, here's Mike Samuelson. Mike Samuelson. I'm pronouncing your last name correctly?
You are. Yep.
Good. Tell me how it is that you have found your way into my basement.
Okay, well, this is the story that I tell a lot of people. I came across the Story Trek, your show, several years ago. And I myself have a journalism degree, but for various reasons did not pursue journalism. I think I've always felt drawn to it and felt drawn to people's stories and things like that. And I have described myself before as a slobbering fan of story podcasts and story shows and stuff like that. So at some point in time, I came across the Story Trek, and I watched the show as much as I could. And I so many times I heard myself saying, man, that guy's got the coolest job. You know, isn't that cool just to be able to go up to random people and to find out their stories and all that? And so I finally kind of decided, okay, you know what? I want to reach out to this guy and just see what it's all about and see if I can have a conversation with him or whatever. And this guy being you, I started looking you up through the show, and then went initially and reached out to you with from your production company, and didn't really get anywhere with that. You know, emails must have fallen through or whatever. But happened to mention it to my wife, and she took it on her own to kind of reach out and find you. And I happen to work for a company that is located here in Salt Lake City, even though I live in Columbus, Ohio. And we were out on a walk one time, my wife and I, and she goes, I got a hold of Todd Hansen. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah, he's willing to talk to you. And I had no idea what that was going to turn into. Yeah. I had no idea whether it was just going to be like, okay, kid, you know, here's some advice, you know, go have fun, or or whatever it was going to be. But I got all excited about it, told a lot of people that, you know, that she had done this for me, and never got around to getting a hold of you. Yeah. And then she got a hold of you a second time, and you called me, and I was going to be out in Salt Lake a week later, and that was the first of the times that we met up with each other, and then I really knew coming out of that conversation that I really did need to pursue something that would involve me finding out somebody's stories. And I had no idea what the deliverable was going to be, but eventually started honing in on the idea of doing a podcast. And then, of course, you and I have had a couple more conversations each of the times that I've been able to come out to Salt Lake, and it's been very, very inspiring. And the last time I was here, offered sort of an interview exchange, your podcast for my podcast, and I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And then I was like, oh no, I need to do a podcast so that I have something that I can, can show you, can say, hey, I did it, And so that's what got us here.
Yeah. So now you're doing a podcast.
I am. It's really early in the process. I've got...
so is mine.
But mine comes without all of the benefits of years and years of experience. I have the degree, but that's, several decades back.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've recorded now 5 episodes. I have a couple that have been posted, another one that's getting ready to be posted, and then a couple that are in editing. And I have a whole list of people that I want to talk to, and if I pull it all off, I may have 25 episodes, and then hopefully by then it'll have grown into something where people are wanting to reach out to me and say, hey, I've got a story that I want to share. But I've loved being able to sit across from somebody and be able to just listen to them for about an hour. I'm very aware of the fact that I can get into conversations where somebody says something and I can go, oh yeah, I relate to this. And then I turn it into a story about me. But for this podcast in particular, it's been, I want to hear as much as possible from the other person during that about an hour that we talk. And it's been really fun. And I've gone into most of them so far with the tiniest speck of what I think it might be like, and I've been so blessed to hear so much more stuff and have the story go in a way that I didn't know it was going to go.
And because of that conversation we had back then, and that's, you answered my question. That's why you're sitting in my basement today.
Yeah.
We're having this conversation. And when you showed up at my house today, you brought me a gift.
I did. So the last conversation that we had, and probably the thing that kind of kicked it into gear, was you had mentioned to me that at your church service recently that one of the things that was talked about was that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time to plant a tree is now. And that really resonates with me because I could have gotten into the media, actually 30 years ago when I got out with the journalism degree. And I always kind of felt a little bit of a hole in my heart for being able to tell people's stories. And I was like, wait, it is time to plant that tree. So the gift that I brought you was a bonsai tree, because I didn't know if I could fit a full-size tree in the car and if you'd want to put it in your yard or whatever. But
cool.
But it was, I felt like it was good symbolism to be able to say, hey, you know what? I really appreciate you being the person that encouraged me to plant that tree, my podcast, and see where it grows from here.
Yeah.
And so that was really cool.
Yeah. So. That's so awesome. That's an awesome gift, and it's so symbolic. And both of us should have started our podcast years ago, right? But we didn't. But we started it when we could and when we did. So we started it now.
Right.
And that's such a great lesson for anybody who's listening to this.
Yeah.
Start whatever you've been putting off now.
Right.
And don't put it off another day.
Well, and the truth is too, 20 years ago, it may not have, you might not have had the technology, you might not have had you certainly 20 or 30 years ago when I was getting into journalism, that would have had to been my living. And, I had somebody remind me the other day that, you hear people say, find a way to do the thing you love and you'll never work a day in your life or whatever. But I think there is some reality to, and this was what the person reminded me, that sometimes you turn your hobby into your job and it kind of takes away the joy of doing it as a hobby. So I'm in a position now where I can make 15 to 20 cents on a podcast or nothing at all.
Yeah.
I can have 10 listeners or 1,000. I hope it's 1,000, but I hope it's more than that. I hope something catches on. But I want to do that because I want to share somebody else's story. And I want to do that because I want to hear somebody else's story. And I don't have to worry now about making it the job, making it the income thing.
Yeah.
So I think now is the better time. I think I could have gotten to this point, and I could have gotten to this point as, okay, this is something I really know is my passion, and oh, by the way, I'm good at it, and I can really edit it well, and I can really do, all of the stuff that needs to go along with it well. Or, right now I can trip over everything and just have fun going along the ride and not worry about it having to generate a paycheck or anything like that. So it's been really, really fun so far.
You're doing it for the joy of doing it.
Yeah.
And if you make 10 cents, you're 10 cents ahead of me. My podcast is not monetized at all at the point. I don't even know how to monetize a podcast at this point, but we're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's the cool thing for us right now. And I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason.
Yeah.
And whatever path you've gone down is the path that you were supposed to go down for whatever reason. The path I went down is where life took me, and I mean, my story, and I had plans for myself.
Yeah.
And what happened in my life was not my plan.
Right.
But life had a different plan for me, and I'm happy the way it's turned out. But you've just got to be ready for what life throws at you.
Yeah.
And I think you're that kind of a guy. And now you're doing something that you are passionate about.
Right.
I'm curious why you're so passionate about stories, what that means to you.
Well, for one, I know that we all have not just one, but just many stories. We live in a world now with social media where I think that we think that we're a lot more connected than we actually are. And I've realized that, where I enjoy the connection is a verbal connection or a connection person to person where you actually get to hear something about their story and where you actually get to interact with their story a little bit. And you think you can do that on social media for a while, but you're really kind of just spying on people. And so I like people. I like getting to know about them. And there's a part of me that likes being able to imagine going through that part of the story that they're in. And I also know that there are people that want to tell stories, that sometimes it's just, can somebody ask me? And we think we're doing that on social media because we can go, oh, okay, hey, guess what I did today or whatever. And you might get some likes and you might get some comments or whatever, but there's not the same kind of passion there. So I believe that everybody has a story. I believe that everybody, when, we all have different contexts in our life. One of the things that is frustrating sometimes is people get really upset with each other because of something, I'll trigger with you something that you're sensitive about, or you may say something that, whether it's a thing about race or a thing about, a certain class level, or if it's a thing about a group of people or any number of things. And what we don't realize a lot of times is that we are all people, that we're all trying to get through life. We're all trying to figure it out. And we're all having to deal with the context that we come into life with. Well, when you have a conversation, a long form conversation, a lot of times, you can understand so much more about their context and understand so much more about why somebody's excited about something or somebody's insulted about something. And, I want to hear those things. And I love hearing the stories of people that get through some kind of adversity, and it makes them better. Or, the story, even the day-to-day, you have some people that are just overjoyed at what they're doing all the time. And it's like, why do you feel so good about that? So I just think there's an endless source of that type of thing. So, I hope that I can share some of that type of stuff. I hope that I can take somebody that is at best an acquaintance or an interest, a hint of an interesting story that I might be starting to talk with, and I can hear something cool out of it and discover something, and somebody somewhere is going to go, hey, that was a cool story, and whether it develops into anything else from there, who knows?
More than somebody just saying, hey, that was a cool story.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope people get out of your podcast?
With the people that I want to talk with, I keep wanting to feel, I want to feel like they can finish the conversation encouraged in some way. And not necessarily that I'm going out and going, I don't want to be a counselor or anything like that, but there's something to being able to say to somebody, hey, I want to hear your story because I know there's something in there that's worth hearing. I know there's something in there that maybe somebody else needs to hear this, or it's going to be inspired by it or whatever. Or maybe you're just, venting or blowing off some steam or whatever. But somebody's out there interested in hearing what you have to say. Somebody's giving some kind of value to what you have to say. And hopefully that brings some kind of encouragement. Even if you didn't know that you needed encouragement. Mm-hmm. It's kind of cool to be able to go to somebody and say, hey, you know what? I want to listen to you for an hour. I want to hear something about you. And there's something that makes them feel special about that. And, it also occurred to me the other day that it's an interesting distinction between two different ways I could approach that. One way I could approach it is I could go up to somebody and I could say, hey, you seem a little interesting. I want to sit with you for an hour and look at you across the table and let you tell me about yourself. And I'll ask a couple of questions, but basically, I just want you to sit with me and talk with me. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, that versus, hey, you know what? You seem interesting. I want to sit with you for about an hour with you sitting across the table with me. And I'm going to put a microphone in between us so that I can share your story with the world.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is more than likely the first approach is going to fail. The second approach, I can go, hey, I'm doing this podcast and I think you're interesting and I want to share it. And for some reason that people are like, ooh, cool, you're doing a podcast? Yeah, I do want to share it. So they get to tell their story. I get to hear something neat, nice and new and cool. And then I get to hopefully leave this with them feeling encouraged and with me being excited about, hey, that was cool.
That's fascinating that you should mention that, because if I were just to go door to door and say, hey, I want to come in and find out all about you, just knocking on random doors, people would probably think I'm nuts and I'd be arrested. But doing it with a camera crew, as I do, it works. You know? And people are like, yeah, cool, let's do it.
Yeah.
I never thought of that,
Yeah, well, and people are so transparent too.
Yeah.
You let them warm up for a second, and I have one episode that I'm really excited about, and when that one is released, the cool thing about that episode is I had one little tiny idea as to, and I thought it in itself was really interesting. Mm-hmm. We barely touched on that. And instead, we touched on so many other things that I would have never known to ask. And it involved multiple countries, and it involved the love of his life, and it involved, losing family members to disease, and it involved so many other things where, he just got out and enjoyed the world almost by accident. One of those where somebody offers to have him join on something, and he's like, yeah, sure, not knowing what he's getting into. And this was such a wild ride to listen to this story. And that one in particular, I hardly said anything.
Mm-hmm.
I just sat back for the ride. And I'm like, yes, I can't wait to tell this story to other people.
That's cool.
Or not even tell it, just share it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to hear it. I want to
share
share it.
Yeah. So the other side of that question, so I asked what you hope people get from this.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope you get from this?
More opportunities to do the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, there's a part of me that wants to bond with these people. There's a part of me that wants to, you know, because we've had a conversation, we can feel closer to each other, or they can feel more special, or, you know, they can appreciate the fact that we had the conversation or whatever. Hey, you know, there's a selfish part on that. You know, I mean, I want to develop relationships and follow-ups and stuff like that. But, you know, if really ultimately what comes out of it is I have a list of people that I can continue to do this with, where I can sit down with a person and just hear their story and then distribute it, and then hopefully somebody listens to it. Even if they don't, I've had an hour where I've gotten to hear about somebody that I may not have been able to hear about before.
Yeah.
And so many people have, you know, experiences that I will never physically have, but I can see a picture in my head, and I can imagine that, and I can rise to the highs with them, and I can be saddened when they're saddened, and, you know, and I can really feel like I'm a part of that. And so I'd love the opportunity to just continue doing it.
Yeah, and you learn something every time you have a conversation with somebody. Do you feel like you're getting that creative outlet that you've always wanted since graduating from journalism school?
I mean, it's one of many things that I have done or will hope to do over time.
Yeah.
You know, I say I didn't get into journalism. I mean, I got the degree, and for whatever reason, I panicked about, you know, not being sure that I wanted to do exactly what I had been trained for, and then I didn't get into the job. But I've certainly used the things that I learned there in many other places. And then I've been allowed to come down a road that has allowed me to, now we live in a world where we can be so creative so easily. And this was a part of the conversation you and I had is, you know, how did you get to this point? How did you get to the point of having a production company? How did you get to a point of being able to know how to do all this type of stuff? And you revealed to me at one point in the conversation that at one point you were the one-man, you know, band, and you had to do all of it. And you know, it wasn't the school training that got you through a lot of that. Some of it was, okay, I need to figure out how to do this company. Look it up on the internet. I need to figure out how to learn, you know, how to video edit. Okay, we'll learn how to do it off of YouTube or whatever. And, you know, so there's really kind of a no excuses atmosphere now. Yeah. If you want to do it, go for it. You know, so yeah, this is one area where I definitely, you know, feel like I'm being creative. It's an area where I've been more passionate about this than I've been about a lot of other things that I've done that people would say, hey, you're passionate about that. No, this is one that I'm annoying people because I can't stop telling people about it and stuff like that. And I'm already starting to extend it in my head. You know, can I have a shorts version of it? I mean, to the point where I even have in my head this logo of, you know, the regular logo, but repeated on a pair of jockey shorts, and it has the name of the show and says shorts after it. And then maybe I can do, you know, small form stories, or I can do something around a theme. You know, hey, we've got Thanksgiving coming up, so maybe instead of 1 hour with a bunch of people, I could have 3 or 4 stories about something that they're thankful for. So it could be themed, whereas this one's not themed, but it's still grabbing somebody's story, you know. And I've got some ideas for, you know, these ones have been about collecting other people's stories, but there's a part of me sometimes that wants to just spew information or conversation out, and
why not?
So yeah, it's definitely spurring that kind of, oh, maybe I can do this now, and maybe I can do this now. Yeah, absolutely. So it's the start, but it's definitely, it's been something that's really been, I've been jazzed about it.
It makes you excited to wake up in the morning.
Yeah, and in all honesty, I realized really quickly that if I didn't edit a single episode, but I got to have that hour-long conversation with somebody, that's the cool, exciting part of it.
Uh-huh.
But it's also kind of cool to be able to put it into something that sounds like, it's at least somewhat semi-professionally done. And somebody somewhere is going to be like, hey, that was a cool story, or whatever. And it's fun. It's fun looking at what little analytics you have at this point and going, oh, wait, there's somebody in Pennsylvania listened to my story. I have no clue who that is.
Yeah.
But that's cool. It reached out to somebody else. And maybe they'll listen to another one. Yeah, so, yeah.
And if it can grow and grow, that would be great.
Yeah.
Sometimes the drudgery is in the editing, though. The conversations are fun.
Yeah. Though that's one thing that's nice about a podcast is you don't have to be in a certain length of segment. You can stumble over words.
Mm-hmm.
You can decide not to edit something out. Maybe you're like, okay, this wouldn't normally go into a news story. It wouldn't go into even a special interest package or whatever. It would just, but it makes the person that's listening feel like they're part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So if you hear some ums and some and stuff like that, that's okay. Along with somebody tripping over something, along with the cat jumping up on the table in the middle of the conversation, whatever.
It's a stream of consciousness. That's what podcasts are to me.
Yeah.
Some are very well designed and planned and crafted and amazing, but mine aren't. They're just conversations,
Well, and I started as low of an entry point as I could start. I wanted to go, okay, you know what? I don't want to mess around with video. Because that's another level that I have to get equipment for. Mm-hmm. That's another level I have to worry about whether or not something's running or whatever or not running.
Yeah.
And so I didn't go with the absolute minimum. I mean, there are apps, including the one that I use, where you could record the entire podcast on your phone. You can edit the thing on your phone. You can pick music backgrounds and stuff like that. And I opted to go a step above that. I actually bought some equipment and I'm trying to learn how to use the audio editor with the multi-tracks and that type of stuff. And I want to try to have some nicer music and all that type of stuff. I don't know if I'll ever get to the point where it's a thoroughly produced show, but I think that even now I've got it to the point where people listen to it, hopefully, and they feel like it's well designed. And they feel like the conversation is the right length and it doesn't, a lot of times passionate people are passionate about something that involves a lot of detail that none of the rest of us are ever going to completely relate to.
Yeah.
And I know, I've had an episode where I've struggled with that a little bit, where I'm sitting here going, okay, are the people... I know there's something really interesting coming at the end of this, and I don't want to mess up the order of the conversation.
Yeah.
I wonder if we can get to it, and I know I've got a commercial break in the middle of it. So if we can get them to the commercial break, I can introduce the going into the commercial break that, hey, when we come back, we talk about this, and we hear the heartbreaking story of why, I don't know if people are going to get through all the episode or not, but I hope that there's enough there. And maybe there's that one geeky person that's just like the person I'm talking to that goes, yeah, man, that's just like my life, So that's fun.
Yeah, you can start getting really technical.
Yeah.
And we can start talking about all the equipment and microphones and the analytics and the quarter hour and the SOTs and the VOSOTs and the package and all the journalism terms. Did you have all those terms back in J school?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was a different world because we didn't do anything digitally. And
me neither.
I remember running tape back and forth, and I think at that point you could record onto another track on the tape. You didn't have to cut things with a knife and tape it together. But
I was hieroglyphics. We were chiseling into stone.
But and one of the people I talked to had actually come out of journalism school and gotten into the business about the same time that I would have. And it was there were some times where, you know, I could really relate to what he was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And but I wanted to just listen to it from his side because I didn't want to guide that. I just wanted to kind of, I was hoping that I could be a good representative of somebody in the audience and go, oh, that's cool. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that. Oh yeah. And wow, that's, you know, and so, you know, there's a good place for the geekiness, especially if somebody is really passionate about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, if in situations where the conversation goes a little bit long in one direction, you know, that's when hopefully I'll have you know, I'll think about, okay, well, maybe here's a place where I can throw in a question real quick and see if we can get it back on track.
Well, but the important thing is to be passionate about what matters. And, you know, I've always thought of, you know, the equipment and, you know, lights, microphones, cameras, whatever, and you'll never be up to date with a camera because it's going to change as soon as you buy one.
Right.
You know, it's out of date. And it's just a tool.
Yeah.
And the viewer is not going to care about a blurry shot if it's a compelling shot, if it's somebody saying something that is very dramatic, or it's a moment that is just amazing, if it's a little out of focus or the framing isn't just right or something, you know, or if it's a podcast and the audio might be a little crackly or something, but somebody is saying something with such passion that it just reaches into their soul. None of that's going to matter. So it's the substance of what you're talking about, and that's really what matters. So yeah, all the geeky stuff, none of that really matters.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's the passion that you have for what you do. So my question would be, what advice do you have for somebody who might be in your shoes or where you were a few months back thinking, yeah, I'd like to do something, you know, but don't know what.
Do it. You know, figure out something. Talk to some people about it. You know, when the voice recorder that I have now, I reached out to a friend who I knew did some podcasts and all that, and hey, what should I get? What would you get if you had the ability? And you know, I looked at reviews and stuff like that, but you know, ultimately I went on his recommendation because now I have a tool. You know, I know personally I am not good at just doing something because I think, oh, this would be neat to do it, or it'd be fun for me to do it for myself. But just do it. Just understand that we live in a world now where you can learn anything that you want to learn. And when you and we live in the price point for entry into a lot of the things we want to do is very, very low. You know, once again, I advertise on my podcast the platform that I use, and their whole thing is you can do it for free and you can do it on your phone. You know, you get the app, you record the segments, you edit the segments, and all that type of stuff. Well, that's not something we could have done 10 years ago.
No.
And now we can do it. We can do whatever we want to do, and we can fail, and we can trip over things. And those are going to be the things that are going to help us learn the better things anyway. You know, and I don't think there are going to be that many people that are going to jump on your podcast fan page and flame you because you you didn't do a good job or whatever. You know, and there's definitely going to be some people out there that are going to like hearing what you're doing and find it interesting. So just do it. Yeah. You know, and while it is the 20 years ago is the best time to plant the tree, and now is the second best time to plant the tree, I don't think there's any reason to take any shame in not planting the tree 20 years ago.
No.
So.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But don't let now pass you by.
No, don't let now pass you by. And you know what? If now passes you by, tomorrow's a new now.
Yep.
So go ahead and, you know, whichever now you need to say, okay, now's the now that I'm going to do it. Do it.
Yeah.
But don't regret not doing it because, you know, just do it. So
I love that advice. No excuses and just do it.
yeah.
Because it's free.
Yeah.
And most people have a phone.
Yeah.
And I was interviewed for a podcast not too long ago, and the guy just used his phone. He sat the phone in between us,
Yep.
recorded it all on his phone. It sounded fine. Didn't sound as good as what you used to record us, or maybe what I'm using to record us right now. But it sounded fine.
Right. And it also gives you an incredible amount of freedom that if you really want to do something, especially if you're doing the random stuff or whatever, you know, this was before I had the recorder, but I had a conversation with somebody, and the conversation started because we were standing near some fountains, and, you know, they were ones that kids used to run in a lot every once in a while. And this person just happened to kind of zip down and zip up a jacket that she was wearing. And I was able to take the time to just say, I thought you were going to run in there for a minute. And that started a conversation that was completely unexpected. We talked for, you know, like an hour, and she had some passionate things to share or whatever. Well, had I had the phone and had I had the app, or had I had the recorder that I had, you know, that could have been a moment where I could say, hey, you know, this is really interesting. Can we take a couple of moments to sit down? Can we take a half hour to sit down and talk about this? You know, so not only is it easy, but you have that freedom to do it kind of wherever you want. And yes, you have to deal with, you know, sounds around you and, you know, that type of stuff. But that's also acceptable in the podcast. You know, I think everybody would be fine with a podcast where two people are sitting at a table next to a set of fountains, you know, and you hear kids screaming in the background while, you know, it's fun. It's part of the atmosphere or whatever. Yeah.
So here's the most important question.
Okay.
What does your wife think of all this?
I think she's really happy that I've found something to be really passionate about for a while. You know, she's enjoying it kind of secondhand, you know, so because I get to be excited about it. And she's the person that took the time to have the conversation with you, which got the ball rolling, you know. So I am intensely appreciative of your participation, and also intensely appreciative of her participation. And so I think that, you know, I mean, that makes her glad, you know. She sees me thriving on something, you know, so she's definitely been supportive of it. So
okay, well, good, because it could go, you know, different way.
Yeah,
it could be cursing that you've got this new hobby or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it takes time.
Yeah,
you know, it especially on the editing stuff, you know, it's one thing to take an hour, or, you know, usually an hour and a half or 2 hours by the time you get set up and tear down and leave where you're meeting and all that type of stuff. Yeah, so it's definitely a time commitment, and it could definitely be something that could take away, you know, or, you know, there's obviously always the possibility of you know, somebody you love being jealous of something you love. But, you know, I haven't experienced that, and I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah. So what do you encourage your listeners to do in your podcast?
At the end of every episode, I ask them, don't forget to take, I'm not going to remember exactly what the words are, but don't forget sometime this week to have a real conversation in person with somebody. You're going to want to, the chances are they've got a great story, and you're going to want to hear it, and you're going to want to share it. Now, obviously, some of that is shameless self-promotion because I can put the name of the podcast into the encouragement.
Hear it and share
but really, the encouragement is, while you may feel connected to people on social media and stuff like that, don't forget to be connected to people in real life. Don't forget to have that long form conversation, you know. Enjoy somebody else's life by being involved in it a little bit. So
there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Than being on a phone or a computer, having a conversation.
Yeah.
Than face to face.
Yeah. I mean, even if you're doing a lot of back and forth text and all that, you know, it's still, you know, if I post something on Facebook and I get a conversation going, and, you know, I still have to rely on my own interpretation of the voice that I am listening to by reading the text there. So I can change their mood. I can change their, the passion that they want to display on one thing into passion somewhere else in the sentence or whatever. So I can feel like I know that we're having a conversation. I can feel like we're relating to each other or whatever, but I can still manipulate that in my own head. Whereas if I have an in-person conversation with somebody, I'm going to get a lot more. I'm going to get, different way people look at you and body movements and inflections of their voices and all that type of stuff. And it's so much more content. It's so much more real than it is in any kind of conversation that you'd have online.
Agreed. So what are we pitching today? What do you want people to know about for you?
Well, okay, so I have a podcast called Hear It, Share It. It's available on many different podcast apps, but I also have my own domain, so it's hearitshareit.com. And it is just a podcast about getting to know what makes people who they are, and it is pretty much about an hour where that person is mostly the one telling the story, and hopefully I'm asking enough questions to keep the conversation going in an interesting way. And, and I encourage people to support the podcast by doing what the name says: hear it, then share it, share it on your favorite platform. And hopefully this will be something that over time it'll grow into something where, the podcast app that I use gives the opportunity to leave voicemails. So, I'd love to get this to a point where you're going to go out and you're going to listen to Hear It, Share It. And you're going to potentially want to share your own story. Maybe you can share it with me on the voicemail, which could lead to an episode. Or maybe you could also say, hey, you know what? This is something that's pretty cool and easy to do. Maybe I want to do my own,
Yeah.
So yeah, go to hearitshareit.com, listen to the podcast. When you hear it, share it with somebody else, and hopefully you'll enjoy what's out there.
At the very least, listen to the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you will be inspired to start your own podcast.
Yeah.
Or just go listen to somebody else's story. There's no shortage of great stories out there.
Nope.
A few billion in the world to listen to. So.
Yeah. I mean, the podcast for me is a tool to get people into the conversations, as I mentioned earlier. But there's no reason why it can't be the conversation in the grocery store checkout line.
Exactly.
There's no reason it can't be, as much as it goes against convention, you can have a conversation in an elevator. You can have a conversation.
Wow. Whoa.
Yeah.
In an elevator?
Yeah, in an elevator. And obviously it's the start of the conversation.
Think about that one. Okay.
I mean, you're not going to hold them there for 27 floors.
No.
But certainly even just the how are you doing?
Yeah.
And if it turns into an interesting story. And there are people out there because some of them come up and share whether or not you're asking about it.
Okay, so that's your challenge today,
yeah.
Everybody.
What, have a conversation in an
elevator?
elevator?
Have a conversation in an elevator. Next time you're in an elevator, strike up a conversation.
Oh man, the great social experiment by Hear It, Share It.
And tell us about it. Tell us about it on Hear It, Share It, or Trippin' with Todd.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and you know what? If it wasn't for Trippin' with Todd, and if it wasn't for the story track, and if it wasn't for, all of the things that had to line up, I'd probably still be going, oh man, that guy's got a cool story. A cool job. I'd love to do that sometime. Well, you know what? Now I am.
Now you are.
So.
And you realize it's not rocket surgery. If this guy can do it,
I love that.
If
that
Todd
phrase.
can do it, anybody
surgery.
can do it. I figured it out on YouTube. So
yeah,
there you go. I mean, I had the journalism degree and did the news career, and then I had to start a television show, and the TV show I figured out on YouTube. So
that's awesome.
Here we are. We're sitting in my basement.
Awesome.
All right, Mike Samuelson in Todd's basement on Trippin' with Todd. This is a first, by the way. I've never interviewed anybody in my basement. It's my domain.
Yeah.
Nobody else gets to be down here.
Well, it's still got your flavor.
Yeah. Well, this is everything. I try to pick up a little something from everywhere I go. So Mike is a great guy. As you can tell, he's passionate about stories and meeting people and hearing what makes them tick. And he and I are just kind of kindred spirits in that way. And I am happy to report that immediately after this, I took a trip. I'm trying to think where it was. I think we were in Virginia, staying in a hotel in Tennessee, and had a conversation in an elevator. And it wasn't awkward. You just have to start talking. And found out, I mean, it was a very quick conversation. I was there with the guy I was working with, my camera guy, and talked to this lady for just a couple of floors and found out very quickly that she had been there for like 2 or 3 months working, and then she got off on her floor and we went up to ours. Have conversations with people. It makes a difference. In their life, it'll make a difference in your life. Another thing I'm happy to report is that the tree he gave me. Now, if you're just listening, you can't see this amazing bonsai tree that he gave me is still alive, and it's been several months. That's unusual for me to keep a plant alive, but I have kept this alive, and it seems to be thriving despite a few dead leaves, which I think maybe you bonsai tree experts can correct me, but I think that's probably natural. That's typical. It happens. It should shed some leaves, right? But plant some trees. Maybe you felt it was too late. You should have done something years ago, and you didn't do it. Well, when's the second best time to plant that tree? Do it now. No excuses. Get it done. I did this. I finally got this podcast ready. And here you go. Check it out. youtube.com/TrippinWithTodd. You can check out my website, TrippinWithTodd.com, and hear the podcast. Trippin with Todd podcast. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time.